Hello there. I get asked a lot of questions about Amtgard. When I go out to park, people at park will ask me questions about stuff. They'll ask me about interactions. They'll ask me rules questions. When I'm at home, my kids will ask me all sorts of things. They always are wanting to know more about the different classes. But the one question I've never asked is, what's your favorite class? Because everybody knows my favorite class is Wizard. I think that Wizard is the best, most interesting, most versatile, and most fun class to play in Amtgard. And because of that, I decided we were going to do a deep dive. So this is our first video in a series of Wizard videos. I hope you enjoy them. Who am I? I'm Squire Callahan Ridgeborn. I am almost a battle master, definitely a wizard, as often as I possibly can be. And today we're going to really do a deep dive into just the rule text around Wizard. The first thing that we really want to understand is, what equipment does a wizard get, right? Well, default, every caster, every class has access to magic staff and dagger. Those two, always free, always available. I really like magic staffs. I think they're really fun mechanically. It gives you just sort of a ability to block something. You know, if you block an arrow, it breaks, but you can block multiple sword shots. It is a very versatile tool that I'm really excited about. That just came out recently. And the dagger is the only weapon you can wield with a magic staff. And that makes it kind of the combo there. Magic staffs cannot be wielded with any other weapons or shields. And they're free. So they're there. They don't cost any spell points. Wizards at level 1 for 2 spell points can buy a short sword. And longsword at level 5, you can buy it for 4 points. And we'll talk about both of those when we go through the actual spells that are available to wizards. So that's the kit. If you have a dagger, a magic staff, a short sword, and a longsword, other than spell balls, you don't need to build anything else to play the wizard class. So let's talk about wizard as a class in general, right? What are the strengths of wizard? What can wizard really do? Well, there's a lot of potential in wizard. There's a very high skill cap. The ceiling for wizard is very, very high. And the big reasons for that is because it has an answer for everything, right? Wizard is unique as a class because it has the ability to reach out to each and every other class and say, you are in trouble now, and I'm going to become your problem, right? The key thing that wizard really does well is it puts people in states, and it punishes people for being in states. And what do I mean by that? Well, we'll talk about kill combos in a later video, but the big thing there is that wizard has the ability to, any class on the field, make them kind of have a bummer of a time. Every class is vulnerable to wizardry, to varying degrees. So, what are the weaknesses of wizard as a class? So, wizard can have too many choices. If you don't understand what you're trying to do as a wizard, you might end up trying to do too many things, and you can get overwhelmed with your options and end up doing a lot of nothing because you try to do everything. Wizard has very few defensive abilities. We're going to talk about those as we go through the levels, but wizard really only has 3 defensive abilities that are really there. You've got swift teleport, force barrier, and ward self. And other than those 3, you're kind of up a creek. I mean, you can try to freeze yourself with an ice ball or something, but if you're in trouble, you're in trouble, right? Wizard is not built for stand-up, straight-in-your-face melee fighting. It's just not what it's good at. And wizards can run out of gas. A mistake a lot of young players, to not literally young, but young to the class players, will make is they'll build their spell lists without considering longevity and continuing effectiveness. And so they'll build these really great lists, and they're really effective for the first 5 minutes of the game, and then for the rest of the game they just have no more gumption because they're out of stuff. So if you don't build your spell list carefully, it's going to be really easy to run out of gas. So let's talk through now. I want to go through all 6 levels of wizard spells, give you some thoughts on each of them, some potential use cases, right? So the first spell that I want to talk about is Banish. And the incant for Banish is the spirits banish thee from this place, and it just makes an insubstantial player return to their base. They have to go to their base, and then their insubstantial state immediately is over. It's a pretty good spell, honestly. I really like Banish. It's a per life, and it is really useful because the main people you're going to see who are being insubstantial are going to be assassins, right? You're going to get the occasional teleporting caster. Every once in a while, you'll have a scout that is out of position and insubstantial, but really, most frequently, you would have a assassin coming through with the insub ability, right? And the really nice thing about Banish is it doesn't actually kill that assassin. Assassins lose very little by dying and gain actually quite a bit, because I believe every assassin ability is a per life. And so if you kill them, they go back to base, they respawn, and they're just going to come back. But if you banish them, they have to go all the way back to their base, and they don't get any of their per lives back because they didn't die. And so it's worse than killing them because they have to go all the way back, and then they have to come all the way forward again. And by the time they get all the way forward again, they haven't had a chance to collect their throwies. They haven't got their per lives back, so they're lower on the insub count. If you've got a really problematic assassin at your park, Banish is going to be something that's absolutely going to be on your list. And I wouldn't go to a Kingdom or a Duchy level event without at least one Banish, because they're just such a versatile, useful tool. The biggest weakness of Banish is really that returning to base doesn't take terrible amounts of time. Compared with a respawn timer, most of the time we've got a minute or 30-second respawn. It can be almost as effective as a kill, because by the time they walk all the way back to base, Banish shines in entropy games where you are going to bog your opponents down by constantly forcing them to move. It really goes well into that type of strategy where you're trying to force them to have more leg day than you have had, right? You can banish yourself. So if you are teleporting and you are an aggressive teleporter and someone is following you and they're going to, when you come out of the teleport, then they're going to get you. Well, what you can do is you can actually banish yourself and you can go back to base. And because you've banished yourself, you're going back, And once you get there, you just exit, and it's a way to alter your teleport direction without having to exit the teleport and become vulnerable. A really big thing that a lot of people miss on this spell is for a greater undead minion and undead minion, you can target them with this, with Banish, even if they're a monk. And because it removes that spell from them, it removes the enchantment, even if the spell itself fails. So, Enlightened Soul, what it specifically does is it makes it so that any magic, they're immune to that verbal. But the enchantment specifically, Greater Undead Minion and Undead Minion, says that if you're banished, the enchantment falls off. So, that is an option for you. Short Sword. You can wield one short sword at a time. It costs 2 points. It's equipment. The big strength of short sword is people say it's the one spell on their list they can never run out of. And I think that that's also its greatest weakness, is it's the one spell on your spell list you can never run out of. And the reason for that is when you have a short sword, it limits your thinking. When you are practicing wizardry, if you have a sword, that is a stick in your hand, and that will put your brain into stick mode instead of words mode. And where you want to be is words mode for most types of wizard builds. Now, if you're just an amazing stick person and you can go around and you can, beat everybody, you're a warlord or whatever, really you can menace quite a bit with a short sword. But are you remembering your verbals? Are you remembering your spell balls? Something that I personally recommend doing is never taking short sword levels 2 to 5, because it will really force you to learn those verbals and those spell balls and get those incants really down, because that's all you've got. You don't have the option to switch over to stick mode and try to get there. The cool thing about buying short sword is even though you can only wield one, you could technically bring all of them. Once you've bought it, you can have any number of short swords on your belt or at your base. And so if your short sword gets heated, whatever, yeet it backwards, grab a new one off your belt, and you're good to go. So I've never personally regretted having multiple short swords if I bought short sword. There have definitely been a couple of times where I haven't brought a short sword and it would have been helpful. But most of the time, if I'm buying a short sword, it ends up just being wasted, or I'm just blocking. And I'd rather have a magic staff instead of the short sword to get the slightly larger blocking surface. So that's short sword for you. Experienced. So experienced is really a very powerful ability that is sort of lackluster at the same time. For those of you who don't know, experienced makes a verbal rechargeable, right? So wizard gets 3 spells naturally rechargeable. We get wounding, we get dispel magic, and we get shove. And then you can buy a maximum of 2 experienced. So that means on your spell list, you should always have 5 verbals that are rechargeable. That's how you never run out of gas, is by having experienced multiple spells. And this will allow you to keep up pressure even if you're running out of gas. If it's getting towards the end of the game, you can recharge those spells and have them at hand. And never forget the power of just being able to recharge shove. A lot of our kill combos that we'll talk about in a later video rely on being able to use experience, because either the enabler or the actual kill spell are going to be a per refresh spell, and you need multiple uses of it. And that's where experience comes in. So force barrier is not great. You yell, "I shall not be harmed," and you're frozen for 30 seconds. They just dropped a 8.6 rule set that changes this to 10 seconds. I still say it's bad. It technically gets you out of combat. It gets you out of combat, but it's so unuseful because you're just there. And like, you're frozen, you're vulnerable, you're on a timer. Everyone around you knows you're on a timer. And so, unless it's one of those, like, fight after death situations, but fight after death has been removed, that was really the only use case for force barrier, it's just not there. Like, maybe if the back line is getting popped and you desperately need to get out of there, but I'd rather just use the swift teleports. Force barrier, you're vulnerable to absolutely everything while you're in force barrier. You have no options. You cannot move at all. And the only thing that it's really good for is if you're a very low level wizard, like we're talking about level 1 or level 2, and you really don't have much going on. You might want to grab a force barrier or 2, because it can give you some survivability, but there's just such better choices, including just taking the death and getting your lives back. So I really don't recommend force barrier in hardly any situation. Force bolt, on the other hand, is okay. Controversially, I think that force bolt is a little overhyped. It's just a little force bolt. It's fine. It's sort of the spell ball by which all other spell balls are measured, right? So you hit something with a force bolt. I mean, it has the effects. If weapons are destroyed, that's pretty good if you can hit weapons. Armor is armor breaking, so that's good. And if you can wound a player, you can wound a player. Pretty simple stuff. It's basically an arrow, right? Well, weapon breaking and armor breaking are both pretty good. Right now, we have Paladin and Anti-Paladin and Warrior supremacy going on. Barbarian is not seeing a lot of play. So you're very rarely going to get to pop a piece of armor with 1 spell ball, if it's a proper armored enemy. You might see like a 3-point scout or a 2-point archer or assassin, but generally that's not who you're going to try to force bolt. So, the really nice thing is you get 3 of them per point that you buy, and that's just such a steep rate of force bolts to points that it's very efficient, right? At level 1, you can get 15 force bolts. I'm not saying you necessarily want to, because again, it's a very mid spell, but it's definitely there. It's the spell that we're kind of going to measure everything else against. The big weakness of force bolt is shields, because it does nothing to shields. So you got to hit a weapon or an armor piece or a body to really get value out of it. So just be aware of that. If you're playing Elemental Barrage Force Bolt Shotgun, that can be very interesting. I've never actually seen this run in real life, but everybody has a shotgun Force Bolt story that they heard from like their brother-in-law or something. At some event, some point, some legendary guy brought 12 Force Bolts out there, and he just shotgunned them all over the place, and it was super effective, and I don't know if I believe it or not, but yeah, so there's Force Bolt. That's probably the spiciest take I have on the Wizard list, is that Force Bolt is not very good. I'd rather have every other ball on my spell list other than Force Bolt. Heat Weapon. Ooh, Heat Weapon is crisp. So Heat Weapon is one of the very few spells that work on our arch nemesis monks. Monk is such a powerful class, being able to ignore all the verbals, and Heat Weapon looks at that monk and says, hey, I got something for you, come here. You heat their weapon, they can't wield it for 30 seconds. It's great. If you've got somebody wielding a polearm, that is probably because they're not very good at sword and board, and you can push them back from the front line just by targeting their pole with Heat Weapon. There is the rare scenario where they're just an amazing pole fighter and they're going to know to charge you with their pole, in which case you need to heat that weapon really fast, but it works. The big weakness of Heat Weapon is flow. If someone has multiple weapons in their hand, you can't heat all of their weapons at once. That's what pyrotechnics is for. So, you've got the flow fighters out there. Anybody who has a spare weapon, you see this depending on a park's meta, how many people actually bring a spare weapon. If you've got a park that is familiar with Heat Weapon, they're going to have a spare weapon. And if they're just not, then you won't see it as much. I always have a little giggle if I'm at a Kingdom Field and I see somebody walking around with a pole and no backup, because I know that if I heat their weapon, they're just going to stand there for 30 seconds and not know what to do. So, yeah, that's the fun thing. And always remember, Heat Weapon targets the equipment, not the person. So you can always target them even if they're enchanted or, a monk or anything like that. Mend is just the goat right here. Mend is such a handy thing to have. It's your prestidigitation, but for Amtgard. And you fix a thing, right? You can restore a point of armor, which is not very efficient if they have a lot of points of armor, but you can fix a single shield or a sword or a spear or whatever, and it's very handy. It's got a lot of versatility to it because you can do so much. Other classes get it more and get it better, which is honestly okay, because mostly Wizard wants to be dealing damage, not trying to fix stuff, but it's always worth having at least one mend on your list, just because you never know when you're going to need to use it or opportunistically pass it around. If you are enchanted and you have magic armor, you can mend your own magic armor, so that's a team play to be on the lookout for. Shove is probably my favorite spell. I love Shove. If there's one thing I probably have a reputation for, it's using Wounding and Shove. It's naturally rechargeable. It hits everybody because it's sorcery. Recharge times 3 is basically free, right? That incant for recharging, you should be practicing that if you're a serious Wizard player until you can get it in less than 10 seconds regularly, right? And then you want it to be always, and then it should be 9 seconds and 8 seconds, and you should be able to speak that recharge incantation very clearly, very quickly. And Shove is just an amazing spell. Half the time you don't even have to actually use the spell, because if you point at someone and you start saying my power shoves thee, a lot of times they're going to start running backwards their 20 feet so they get a head start on it and they can get back quicker. Well, then you just stop casting at them, you pick the next guy in line, and you start shoving him. See how many times, because if they get out of range, you can't finish the spell anyway. So how many people can you successfully shove off of a line without actually having to stop and recharge? The big weakness of shove is it doesn't do any damage permanently. See, I hesitate to say it's a weakness that it doesn't deal damage, but the big thing that you're doing with shove, if you're building a shove-centric strategy, when you're shoving someone over and over and over again, you're tiring them out, because the optimal thing to do when you get shoved is to do the fitness gram pacer test or whatever it was, where you run back 20 feet and then you dash forward 20 feet as fast as you can and then you kill them, right? But nobody does that, because they know that, oh, I got shoved, I'm going to go back 20 feet and then come forward again. Well, that's a 40-foot jog. Even if they're fresh, that's rough to do. You can absolutely wear out a fighter by constantly shoving them. I've done it. If you shove somebody 15 times in a game, by the end of that game, when you start to target them, they'll get this look in their eyes, this look of please not another shove, and then you shove them, and that look in their eyes turns to just a little bit of hatred, and then they have to go back 20 feet again. And by the time they get back, you've already recharged and shoved somebody else and recharged it again, and you've got it for them locked and loaded. Because you didn't have to move. You've just been ready to go the whole time, right? So, shove. It's a great spell. I love it. Last little pro tip there. You can shove yourself if you are stopped. If you are in a situation where you are, you got held personed, or a lightning bolt hit your leg or your garb or something, pinning arrow to the garb or to your legs or limbs or whatever, you can shove yourself and recharge and shove yourself until you are by a buddy that has release, or until you're back at your base and you're safe behind the line again. Let's talk about level 2 spells. So, level 2, things are getting a little bit better. They're still not amazing, but a lot of good value is found at level 2. Astral Intervention. Making someone go into the Aether is such an interesting little thing. Forcing someone to become insubstantial. They can't attack you. They're also not vulnerable to physical attacks, but it gives you opportunity to go up and do things. You can use touch range on an insubstantial player. So there's that. The biggest strength is it creates your first class combo. You can get a poor man's Lost using Astral Intervention and Banish. You first Astral Intervention them so that they become insubstantial, and you banish them so they have to go back to their base. It's a way of moving a target out of an area. Both of them are per life. If you're a level 2 wizard, I recommend doing this. It's a really great little combo that you can get a lot of mileage out of. The only really big weakness for it is command immunities. 3 out of your 4 best targets for doing anything, your Paladin, Anti-Paladin, Warrior, and Barbarian, all of them except for Warrior are immune to command. And so it's sort of a long-distance thing that you have to deal with. The big handy thing is if you cast Astral Intervention on yourself, you actually can exit that state early by using the normal exit incant, because you chose to go into it, so you can choose to come out of it. Kind of a weird little rules interaction there that some people miss. So you can I command thee to retreat into the Aether and get out of there without actually having to move for a teleport. Situationally could be helpful. Break Concentration, the good classic counter spell, right? I hope you brought 2 blue mana, because, I'm not going to let you play. Break Con can be very, very useful. If you're going against a rival caster who is a problem, you can just start suppressing them all the time, right? Just every once in a while, just be like, hey, I command you suppressed. Hey, I command you suppressed. Just, that guy over there, he's suppressed. Stops him from casting. Pretty good. The big weakness of Break Concentration is it really requires you to know the names of people. Getting 2 class descriptors off with a Break Con is very difficult, because if someone's starting to cast down on you, right? First, you have to identify who's casting at you. That guy over there. Okay, I see him. Then you have to figure out what class they are. Then you have to figure out a descriptor. It creates that small little window that you can get out of it, especially if you know who's casting at you. That gives you a lot of ability there. Command immunity, again, can be a problem. It's going to be less common now that Paladin's Extend Immunities takes up an enchantment slot. So we'll see less pro command on casters in general. But that's still a thing to be aware of. Entangle. So this is our second ball type. You get 2 of them every time you buy it, which is really nice. It's got an engulfing stopped effect, which is just very nice. It's a very point-efficient way of buying spells. And with the lack of barbarians out there, it's actually kind of busted because you can stop everybody. Other than the barbarian, because there's always one. But, that's sort of a very small weakness. The other big weakness of Entangle Ball is that it doesn't do wounds. That's less of a problem, but, I kind of see that Entangle Ball might be coming back around. Ice Ball just got nerfed pretty hard in the new 8.6 update, so that Wizards can only buy 3 of them, and most of the others, I believe, can only buy 2. And so Ice Ball might become less frequent, and we might start seeing Entangle Ball being the ball of choice, being a 2 per purchase. It's lower level, and it works on most people still. So something to be on the lookout for. We'll see how the actual field develops over time. Innate instantly charges something, and it's bad. Healer gets innate per life, which is just amazing because they can recharge their stuff per life. It's great. We get it per refresh, and it is sort of a way of rolling points up instead of down, because you can use your your experienced to make a level 4 spell rechargeable, and then use innate to instantly recharge it once. So it's a way of rolling up your points. I generally don't like taking innate because it just feels like a wasted point. I'd rather put it into something else. The only time you really would need it is if you don't have your Steel Life Essence yet. Recharging times 10 is a bummer, but it's not that big of a bummer. It doesn't take that long to do. Especially on those bigger fields, if you get a Battery Bard going, that's a crisp 5. That's not that bad. So innate, love it or hate it, I'm not really a big fan. I do know that as you're leveling up, it can be very helpful to have some innates if you need to do quick combos. Just be aware that you will probably pay for it by running out of something else. Planar Grounding. So Planar Grounding is a spell that I really wish was per life. If Planar Grounding was per life, it would be the superior Banish, because it's just such a dorky meme spell almost, but it makes somebody not be insubstantial for 30 seconds. And they didn't have to be to begin with, right? You could target anybody with this spell and be like, you may not be insubstantial for 30 seconds. And I just kind of think that that's funny. The big strength of it is, of course, assassins and scouts and anybody that's going insub a lot. You can say, hey, stop that. I want you to be here with me on the physical world, right? It's just per refresh, and it's a level 2 per refresh spell. Banish is right there at level 1. You can roll points down, so it's just not worth it, right? And once you get up to a little higher level, you're able to get Dimensional Rift. It just doesn't work. You might grab 1 or 2 of these if you've got a problem with insubstantial, but again, Banish is just right there, and it's per life. It's just more useful, right? So release. Release is a great spell. You always want at least one release on your spell list there. You never know when you're going to get hit with an awe or a terrify or an agoraphobia or entangle bolt or anything, and being able to get out of that is invaluable, right? So it's once per life. It removes a state. It removes whichever state you want, except for cursed. It doesn't remove cursed, which doesn't super duper matter. Any healer that is worth their salt will have greater release to remove curse to res you. So release, sort of a basic spell, but you want to have it. Now suppression bolt is interesting. I would like to see more suppression bolts out there. It's one of those spells that it feels like it shouldn't be good, because if I can hit somebody with a ball, I'd rather hit them with a fireball or a lightning bolt or something that will kill them. At the same time, suppressing somebody for 60 seconds is a lifetime in these games. They might as well be dead. They can't charge, they can't do anything, like they can't cast spells. They're left down to their physical weapons. And you could technically do this to any class. Every class has at least something that they do offensively with magic. So you can suppress anybody. Is it going to make a big difference? Less so on other classes, but definitely if you suppress the healers. So the reason I'm rethinking suppression bolt is that healers usually have medium shields. Like, just something that I've seen a lot of recently is these big, juicy medium shields for healers. And I've been thinking about taking suppression bolt just for them. Just a quick little, like, bonk, don't heal or res anyone for 60 seconds. And sure, there might be other releases on the field, but if you follow that up with a good shove or two to just push people away, I feel like it's relevant. And if you even just need to kill the healer, you can open with the suppression bolt into a wounding, and now what are they going to do? Their whole thing is being able to get out of that situation. Now they're legged, you've got them where you want them, and you can cook them from there, right? So I'm thinking I'm going to play around with suppression bolt some more, try an alternate play style. Teleport is a fantastic utility spell. Do you have somebody on your team you want to put over there? Teleport them. Do you need to get out of a bad situation? Teleport. Do you want to just go for a nice walk? Teleport. Right? When you can swift teleport, that's the premium package right there. Every spell list I take has 2 swifts and 2 teleports because it's your get out of jail free card, right? It just lets you go. The big weakness for it is it has to have a fixed destination. At the time of casting, you have to pick a location. So I always choose one of 2 places, right? 10 feet behind my base or 1,000 feet behind their base, depending on which way I want to go. So, because I can exit it at any time, if I'm walking backwards towards my base and, the rest of my team swoops in and reforms the line, perfect, come right out of it. If I'm moving towards their base, first I can ambulant banish myself if I need to, but also, if they're empty, like if their backfield doesn't have anybody in it, I can pop out and start rolling the back with my dagger. So, teleport. Pretty good. Level 3 spells. This is where it gets good, right? Because at level 3, that's your first proper kill combo where you actually can kill somebody. You get Dispel Magic, which is just, such utility. Let's talk about Dispel Magic. So Dispel Magic is the single most important spell on a wizard list. Dispel Magic is the reason why Warlock sucks. And we'll talk about that when we get to our video about the archetypes, but Dispel Magic is just so good. I think it's a very difficult point to argue to say that Avatar of Nature Druid is not the most powerful build in the game right now. And you can talk until you're blue in the face about how you need to nerf Druid or do it, this, that, or the other thing. But if you've got a good player with Dispel Magic on recharge, that Druid's going to have a rough day. Because they're just going to constantly get popped. They're going to be going through their per refreshes. And you can out dispel a druid. I've done it before. It's a long game thing because you've got to just constantly be on them, and they're going to run away from your dispels, and you're going to have to like flow across the field to really dispel them constantly. But it gets rid of all of their enchantments all the time, and it works great. The big problem is that they will run away. They will run away from your dispel to get out of range. This might be where the extension becomes really useful, so think about that. Any player with an enchantment can be targeted. You can target them as long as they're not dead. So if they're frozen, if they are insubstantial, if they're stopped, it doesn't matter what state they are in, you can still dispel them. And it's very important to remember you can dispel monks because it targets the enchantments, it does not target the player. So, and monks have always been a favorite enchantment bot area because they can't wear physical armor, so they're a very good target for enchantment, and you can really pop them with that dispel. So, drag below, right? Drag below is your kill half of your first proper kill combo. A stopped player dies. Wow, how cool is that? The biggest strength of drag below is how many classes actually stop players. I have a cool chart that I'll show you in our kill combo video, but it works most of the time. The only time it doesn't work is with paladins. Paladins suck. I hate paladins. They're all like, oh, death is icky. I don't want to be hit by death. And so they're immune to death or whatever. So really, paladin's the only weakness to drag below. Now, you do end up with this alternative to Shatter. So Icy Blast Shatter is the premium kill combo. We'll talk about that more in the kill combo video, but a lot of players will take like scouts and anybody who's getting an adaptive blessing or something will pick sorcery to be immune to that, and when you pop up with the Shatter, it can be a little bit of a surprise. Or not the Shatter, the drag below. Pardon me. So extension makes your 20-foot verbal 50 feet. It's great for dispel. It makes that target stick a lot harder, and the really only downside of that is you can't cancel out of it. So like Battle Mage is really handy because when you get the unlimited ambulant from Battle Mage, you can yell ambulant target name, ambulant target name, ambulant target name until you're blue in the face. But as soon as you say extension, you're committed to casting that spell because that's one of your extensions per life and you can't get out of it, right? So there's that. Greater Mend is a really fun spell. So when I was out in Blackspire, I actually got the magic item, the Homestone. And amongst its abilities was it gave its controller Greater Mend once per refresh recharge times 3. And that was such an amazing ability to have on tap for any class. Because, you know what? My Mend is now recharged times 3 and I can fix everything at once. It fixes all of your armor in one hit location, or it can fix one item. So it's slightly... It's really good if you're on an armor heavy team. It is per refresh, so it would be a charge times 10. But if you're in a really long, drawn-out event, it can be so good. I mean, it really is just caught in the middle. It doesn't have the hit that Word of Mending has, because that's one, but being able to recharge it is really good. Last June event for the Rising Winds, we had all-day battle gaming. And by all-day battle gaming, I don't mean we had a bunch of games. I mean we had a single game that went all day long. Right? And you couldn't switch out your spell list. There was no refreshes. It was all day long. And so I brought Greater Mend on recharge, and when somebody rolled up, because it was also Shatter battle, right? Over time, you lost lives from a bucket, so not dying was important. Well, over time, people figured out I had Greater Mend, and so they would come up and they'd be like, hey, I need like 10 points of armor on 3 locations. I'd be like, no problem. Pop the Greater Mend, recharge it, Greater Mend, recharge, Greater Mend, recharge, and we're back where we started. Especially if you grab a Battery Bard, that can keep your team in full armor so fast. But Hold Person is the other half of that level 3 kill combo with Drag Below. You also can use Entangle Ball, but commanding someone to stop, pretty clutch. Several other classes get this. Off the top of my head, I know Scout and Assassin both do. Anything that puts players in a state is good, but the massive command immunity in the game really does hurt Hold Person quite a bit. Ice Ball. So, 2 Bridge Wars ago, I shut down a fighting company with Ice Ball so hard that they recruited me after that event. If you have Ice Balls, you have the ability to tell a player you have to stand still and not do anything for a while. Being frozen is worse than being dead, because at least being dead, you get your pro lives back. When you're frozen, a lot of times you end up getting shattered, and so you have basically just doubled your death count for nothing. It is an engulfing spell ball. It's amazing. With 8.6 reducing max cap for wizards down to 3, we'll see if that affects the meta at all, but Ice Ball is the meta right now. The big weakness of Ice Ball, you can be accused of creating an unfun environment. I personally don't use Frozen at all at the park level, and mostly I don't use it at the duchy level, because it's just unfun to interact with. Like, if you're frozen, it just kind of sucks. You're out of the game. Another weakness of Ice Balls, you have to recover your spell balls. If you're in a really cramped battlefield where you can't get your spell balls back, it can create a problem. In more open fields, Ice Balls are really great because you have no trouble collecting those. Any kind of game where you can force people into an area that they have to come at you from one direction, that can be really good. Lightning Bolts. I prefer to use Lightning Bolts if I'm going to be at Park or Duchy level. I think that they're nicer than Ice Balls, and they're really pretty fun. They stop somebody, you get to yell Lightning Bolt. You know, it's one per ball, so it's max 4, which is more than you can get an Ice Ball now. An engulfing stop, and it will enable your Drag Below, which is really nice. It hits everybody except for Anti-Paladin is immune to the engulfing effect, but Anti-Paladin is less prominent than Paladin and Warrior. I haven't seen a ton of them, but just know that a Lightning Bolt will still break a Anti-Paladin sword unless they have Flame Blade, but you would dispel your Flame Blades, so you don't have to worry about that so much. Ravage. I am very disappointed in Ravage. So the incant for Ravage has recently changed. Now it's just Death shall make thee fragile 3 times. But it used to be Death shall ravage thy flesh and make thee fragile. So it was a huge mouthful of words, and it put people in the worst state, and so nobody ever wanted to use it. Well, I wanted to use it because it was fun to flex on people. So you'd run up and you'd be like, hey, Gore, Death shall ravage thy flesh and make thee fragile, Death shall ravage thy flesh and make thee fragile, Death shall ravage thy flesh and make thee fragile. And then it'd be like, okay, and then be like, hey, Gore, Death strikes off thy left leg, Death strikes off thy left leg, Death strikes off thy left leg, and now they're dead. It was a way of almost dissing your opponent. Not that I would want to diss Gore. I love Gore, he's great, but it was a way of saying, like, I'm so good at this, I'm going to use the worst possible option to kill you, and you really could pull that off occasionally. The biggest problem with being fragile is it has a high team potential, but it's just not very good because anybody can release it, they can run away, it doesn't prevent them from hitting you with their sword, so it doesn't really do anything there. Shatter Weapon. Shatter Weapon's another one of those spells that I feel should be per life. My power destroys thy weapon, and it breaks a weapon, right? It's got a lot of weaknesses, guys. It's got Mend, it's got Spare Weapons, it's a per refresh spell. It hits around everything, but again, Mend is so common in our game. Spare Weapons are so common. Like, anybody who knows what they're doing has an extra sword for Heat Weapon. Shatter Weapon is just going to be slightly more inconvenient. The only thing that really matters with that is it still would hit a monk that gets pro flame, and it would hit anti-paladin. So even if they have their flame blade up, you can break their weapon. So there's a place for it. I just really wish it was per license instead of per refresh, because it's so much weaker than the other level 3 per refresh spells that you get. Throw again. It's awful. Why is it awful? Half the people who are playing don't know the difference between 20 feet and 50 feet. Why do I say that? Because a lot of people will say that 30 feet is 20 feet, and a lot of people will say that 40 feet is 50 feet. And so if you're shoving somebody and they run 30 feet, and then you throw them and they go 40 feet, well, you've gotten 10 extra feet at the cost of a much higher level spell, and it's per refresh. It's just kind of a bummer there, right? Level 4 spells. I love level 4. Level 4 is where you get some of your best equipment. You get the rest of your kill combos. Your kit is sort of fleshed out here at level 4, and everything on top of level 4 is just sort of candy, right? You do start out with Destroy Armor, a spell so bad that they gave you 2 per refresh. The only strength of Destroy Armor is that it's slightly better than 1, because 2 is the bigger number. It has a really weak effect. I destroy armor in 1 hit location. Like, unless you've got a wounds kill friend that is just itching for some ankles, it's not good. Like, yeah, you can break 6 points of armor all at once, and then they're going to kill you and scavenge it back. Like, you know, you got to be aware of that. The only real use case I can see for this is if someone's got ancestral armor up, and for some dumb reason you didn't bring Dispel. But why would you not bring Dispel? It's a lower level, so you could roll down the point from 4 to it if you needed to, and it will continuously work. Yeah, just not a good spell. Dimensional Rift, alternatively. Ooh, premium. I like it. Dimensional Rift, the power of the Aether consumes thee, kills an insubstantial player. I love it. It forces them to react. They either have to come out of insubstantial or be dead. They can get out of it really quick. One cool thing that I recently learned about, when we interviewed Sir Manama for his Battle Knight video, he talked about how you can actually start Dimensional Rift on a player that is not insubstantial. And a lot of times assassins are just so used to going insubstantial when you start casting at them that you might be able to catch them, and by casting Dimensional Rift, they will go insubstantial in response to your Rift, and then you can kill them. I personally am very excited to try this at the next Rising Winds event. Just find an assassin and try to catch them. Fireball. Fireball is great. It's weapon and shield destroying, pops it, it's dead. It's armor breaking, or armor destroying rather, and a player that you hit with a fireball is just dead. It ignores blessing against wounds. If it hits them, they're gone. It's so strong because, you know, being able to break a shield is already good, but if you have 3 fireballs and a warrior, you don't have a problem, because you fireball the shield, you hit the shield again with a second fireball, it breaks their armor, you hit the shield a 3rd time, it kills them. Now, are they going to take that? Maybe. But technically, that is correct, because their shield is in their way, blocking their arm, so it counts as a hit to their arm. Once their armor is broken, that hit to their arm counts as a kill. It doesn't have an engulfing effect, but it doesn't need it, because it breaks everything. Which is just wonderful. Anti-paladins are still affected by fireball on their equipment. If you hit them, it doesn't kill them, but if you hit their armor or their shield or the sword or anything, as long as it's not flame blade is up, it'll break any of those items. So Icy Blast. My power makes thee frozen, and they're frozen for 30 seconds. This is the most controversial spell in Amtgard. Frozen is just the best state to put a player in. We already talked about this a little bit. The big weakness of Icy Blast is if you actually want to kill somebody, it's a times 20 recharge for it. I personally feel that Icy Blast is at risk of getting banned or nerfed at any given moment. The prevalence of it, Druid gets it twice per life. We get it once per refresh. But unlimited purchases. Frozen is just the optimal state to put people in, and it's sorcery. So it's just nothing but upside on this. And I'll have an entire video later about how I would fix the wizard class, and we'll talk about this as well in the kill combo comparison video that's scheduled. But Icy Blast is a spell that might be too good, and I think it's a crutch that people lean on. Since coming out here to the Rising Winds, I have actually not cast Icy Blast a single time, and that might shock some people because I'm always shattering frozen people, but I don't need to Icy Blast them. I'll either freeze them with a spell ball, or I will wait for incidental frozen, because there's a lot of incidental frozen on our fields. But I literally do not use Icy Blast. I think it's too resource intensive, and I'd rather have other things for my experiences. So, Shatter. A frozen player dies. That's so crisp right there. Sorcery always kills. I love sorcery school things. It is once per refresh, but you're going to burn an experienced on it. You are. There's enough incidental frozen on the field that you don't even need a way to make people frozen yourself. I have made a very successful shattering career using experienced shatter with no way on my spell list to make anyone frozen. Healers and druids have ways of making people frozen. They have their spell balls, some icy blast in there, and if you really get known, people will come up to you and be like, hey, that guy's frozen over there, and you can run over and shatter him real quick. Real clutch. Suppress Aura. Suppress Aura, kind of a bad spell. It's per refresh. It suppresses for 30 seconds. It does have a range of 50 feet. One of two spells with a range of 50 feet. It has a longer suppression, but it's just not as good as the other 4th level spells. If this was a per life, I could see it. But again, command immunity being rampant, I command a powerless 3 times is just longer than break concentration, so it's not that counter spell. It's just kind of unplayable. I don't think I've ever seen anyone running Suppress Aura on a serious field, and I honestly can't say I've ever seen anybody run Suppress Aura other than myself, and that was just long enough to figure out that it just was not good. So, not a great spell. Swift, alternatively, is amazing. Always buy 2 of them. You always use them. Whether it's Swift Teleport, Swift Release, Swift Mend, you could make something that usually is slow fast, and boy, does that really work. I love it. It doesn't really have any weakness other than if you have a really wordy spell and you mess it up, you use up your Swift there. And it does have to be at range of touch. Vampirism. So we're going to get into the mostly bad and unusable wizard enchantments. Wizard is not Candy Druid, and playing Candy Wizard is not really possible. And Vampirism sucks. I'm going to be honest with you. It's a Death School enchantment, range of touch, once per refresh. It gives you unlimited adrenaline. Cool. Who wants that? Adrenaline is not great. Barbarian gets it as their level 3 ability, and let me tell you, it kind of sucks. If you're wearing any armor at all, adrenaline is absolutely worthless for you. Because if you are getting limbed when you're wearing armor, you'd rather have scavenge or someone fixing your armor. Why would you want this enchantment? And why would you want to be cursed to have unlimited adrenaline? It's not good. I've tried to figure out how to build around this several times. I've yet to find a list or a teamwork combo that makes Vampirism worthwhile. But let me know in the comments if you did, because kudos to you if you figured that one out. Wounding is amazing. I love Wounding so much. It's one of the big spells that I'm really known for. I just love it. It's naturally rechargeable. It's one of your 3 naturally rechargeable spells, so it should be on every single list you ever build as long as it's a legal selection. It's super duper effective. It makes people stop. It makes people reconsider if they want to interact with you. Really, the only weaknesses are paladins and swift heals. Paladins are immune to it. Swift heals negate it. But if you've got a break con, so you could wound and then break con, whew, there you go. That's a combo. Choosing your targets really effectively for wounding is important. If you can wound somebody, you can lure up a healer or somebody that's going to do the heal incant, then you can deal with them. It will not work if a player is already wounded, so you can't cast wounding twice to kill someone. Charging to full is a recent change that happened, and it makes wounding even more amazing because you can just pop down a line and wound everybody. And now, hey, everybody's legged, and your team has a much easier time maneuvering faster than them, and you can try to get around them, right? So, charge to full. It enables some real shenanigans. I'm a big fan. Level 5 wizard spells. So, level 5 wizard spell, Ambulant. Ambulant is the cornerstone ability of Battle Mage. You can move while you're casting. It's pretty good. If you're not playing Battle Mage, you have to commit to the spell, but usually you know what you're going to commit to. Probably Dispel is the number one use of Ambulant. Or if you've got like a per refresh ability, you really want to make sure sticks. Contagion is another wizard enchantment that nobody wants. It can be really good if you put it on an armored fighter. There was a guy at my very first park who played Flow Warrior all the time, and we'd put Contagion on him, and he would be wounds kill, 6 points armor, but he's fragile. Well, that only works as long as there's not a wizard on the other team with wounding, but it's okay, you know. The ceiling for it is higher than vampirism. Unfortunately, the floor is also pretty high because Imbued Weapon exists, and Imbued Weapon is just better than Contagion. If it had Persistent on it, I would say it could be worth it, but then you're burning a lot of points, right? You're burning three high-level points on this one gimmick that gets blown away by a Dispel. So, think about it. Generally speaking, Contagion is not something I put on my lists. Longsword. Oh boy. Longsword is dumb. Don't buy it. If you are buying longswords, I don't approve of the way you're doing Wizard. Not that you need to live for my approval, but it's a melee weapon. That's fine. If you're going to buy a melee weapon, buy a short sword. It's way lower. It's less points. Longsword costs too many points at too high a level to be good, and you're giving up so much utility for it. And then if you already bought short sword, now you're a flow wizard, you have to drop one of those swords to cast. I've seen people get like straps that'll drop their sword and it'll dangle, and then they can cast and then they can pick up their sword again. You look ridiculous. Like, commit. If you want to play like that, go play Bard. Don't come here with that nonsense and play Wizard. Wizard's a good class, and I expect you to be good at it. That's the other spicy take there. You can bring extra swords. I mean, I've run Longsword before on a Wizard build just to try it out. You can get kills with it. If you're only running Longsword, it does give you a good amount of range. You can do things like heat weapons. You can wound sword arms and then go for kills. There's some things to do with it. I can't justify the point spend there, Phase Bolt, alternatively, is premium. I love a good Phase Bolt. It gets around the enchants. It gets around the monks, right? If you've got a monk that's just blocking all your spell balls with their great weapon, you pop a Phase Bolt, you throw it at them, they block it. Oh, your weapon's broken. Oh, it went through your armor? Sweet. Well, now you're dead. It doesn't have any engulfing or other effect. It's basically just a force bolt, but it gets around magic armor, and it gets around states. It is not stopped by Sanctuary. Sanctuary is a monk ability. They're always super excited, and then you walk up and you gently lob them a phase bolt, and they're like, "You're within 20 feet," and you're like, phase bolt, and then they're like, oh, they feel bad. Phase bolt does work through Sanctuary. Sanctuary does not stop phase bolt. Pyrotechnics is a spell I wish I could run more of. Pyrotechnics is so fun because even the incant for it is kind of fun. I call upon the element of flame to destroy thy belongings. It's almost got like a poetry to it that I really enjoy, and it breaks all of their held equipment, not just their wielded equipment, their held equipment. If they've got 14 swords strapped on a belt, it breaks every single one of them all at once. And oh boy, is that cool, but also not that effective. It does have a range of 50 feet, which is great, but the maximum you can buy is 2. They're per refresh. You can't recharge it. It just kind of hurts. Like, this should be the reason to build Warlock. If Warlock made, well, we'll say that for a different video. I've got several thoughts on how to fix Warlock. My number one thing is make every Death and Flame School below level 5 and below be recharged times 3, and then Pyrotechnics becomes just S tier, amazing, great spell to have. I love it, but I digress. Steal Life Essence is so good. You instantly recharge something. It is what enables wizards to be so effective because, your wizard walks up, Icy Blasts, shatters, steal life. Now, instead of a charge times 20, they have a charge times 10. And you can steal life your teammates, you can steal life your enemies. If they're dead, they're yours. You've taken the life. Instantly recharge. It curses them, so it makes it harder for their healers to mess with them. The big weakness is it is touch range, so if you've killed someone on a line, you're probably not going to pull off the steal life. But you can always get that back from your team. Void Touched. I've got mixed feelings about Void Touched. So it gives you a bunch of really good immunities, right? Sorcery, Spirit, and Death are all good immunities to have. Spirit is sort of a downside, but, it makes you immune to stun at least. You get unlimited Steal Life Essence. So if you give Void Touched to a fellow wizard, they will thank you, and they will give you high fives, and they'll be like, this is awesome. There are some players that actively seek Void Touched at every opportunity, which is fun. If you have a player you know is going to be there that can make use of Void Touched, you should put it on your list. If you don't have a specific person in mind, probably don't want to use Void Touched. Because even if you have a bunch of wizards standing around, are they going to need it? Are they going to use it? Do they have the right build for it? That kind of thing. That's the problem with wizard enchantments, is they're not very often planned for. Speaking of not planning ahead, Ward Self, once per refresh, 2 maximum. 5th level spell, and it just protects you from a wound, a state, or death. I don't like it. It feels like it's trying to do like Blade Ward from D&D, and you are going to use your spellcasting modifier to like block some damage. The fact that it's per refresh really hurts it. I mean, if it was max 1 per life at like 6th level, I could see it being like, ooh yeah, wizards always take that, they pop it on there, they're always immune to the first wound, death, or state. That's pretty good, but I just can't quite justify spending the point for a per refresh blessing against wounds, which is almost always what it is, because you pop your Word Self and it doesn't protect you from an Icy Blast, it blocks an arrow for you, and there's just better things to do with those points. So I don't take Ward Self. I have seen people use Ward Self effectively at like park level, but those games are usually a lot shorter, and we are focusing for kingdom level battlefields for this. So level 6, Elemental Barrage. I am filled with the power of magic, and now I will throw it up at you. Bah, spell balls. You can rapid fire those spell balls so fast. You just speak the name, yeet the ball, go to the next one. I have yet to see it happen because Elemental Barrage has sort of fallen out of favor with the wizarding community, but it is vulnerable to Greater Release. It's sort of one of those spells that you can keep in your pocket. I'll sometimes take Elemental Barrage on my generalist lists. Even though I'm not playing Evoker, Elemental Barrage is cool. And it lets you very quickly throw all of your spell balls, and then you can rapid fire them out. If you're in a very delicate spot and you need to be able to deal with multiple enemies very quickly, Elemental Barrage is your friend. Just start throwing spell balls as fast as you can. Once you're in Elemental Barrage, if you pick up a spell ball, it ends. The state is over. You are immune to suppression when you're in Elemental Barrage, but it can be greater released off of you because it's an ongoing condition. So, Finger of Death. This is sort of the capstone wizard ability. You just point at someone and they're dead, right? Super great. The most you can get for these, I think I believe it's 8. Unless they change something that I didn't see in 8.6. But do you need that many one click kills? Finger of Death is something that runs into a problem, at least when I'm playing it. Do you ever play a video game and you get a healing potion or like a buff item or something, but it's a consumable, and you know that there's a limited number of these items in the game, and so you don't want to use it at the wrong time. You don't want to waste it, right? And you're like, okay, so I did this, and that's sort of what Finger of Death ends up being. You end up saving it for too long, or you blow through them way too fast. I played a game once, I can't remember what the game was on Steam, but it was this little, stealth detective game, and for the entire game, you only had 6 bullets for your gun. And if you used all 6 bullets at the end of the game, you couldn't get the ending because you ran out of bullets. You had to have a bullet left. Well, Finger of Death can be like that. If you blow through all your Fingers of Death, you can't get them back. You're just out. Alternatively, if you don't use your Finger of Death and they call a refresh, you've wasted 6 level points. So those are the things. You don't want to use them too early. You don't want to use them too late. Persistent makes your enchantments stick around. Very few of the wizard enchantments are worth making persistent, because you can't get rid of the wizard enchantments. You can't give them away, and even if you were planning around it, absolutely use the points. It's a good value. If you're trying to show up and give it out, not worth it. Protection from magic is bonkers good. I wish this was a self-enchant most of the time, but this is worth persisting. Persistent Pro Mage is just a crisp thing you can give somebody. They do become cursed on their death, but if you're going to build around Protection from Magic, use the Persistent, use the point there, and just embrace that that's going to be the cost for that, because you can make someone immune to magic, and they have to get dispelled because the casters can't do anything without that. Sphere Annihilation. It's an amazing spell ball. It ignores armor. It's shield destroying. It's weapon destroying. When you hit them, they're cursed. It's just such a good spell ball. It's almost like an engulfing kill, except for it's not. If it hits shields, it doesn't count. Going through armor and enchantments to just kill is like peak wizard spell ball. I do think 2 points for it is a little overpriced. It's already 6th level. I'd like to see that come down to 1 point just to make it a little bit more reasonable, but it is a spell ball, so I can see why they wanted to make it 2 points. I do think max 1 is appropriate. Word of Mending is a hysterically funny spell. It's funny to say, it's funny to use. It fixes everything, right? You get some warrior that runs up to you, they're down all their points, they need everything back. slap them on the back and give them a good old spadoinkle, they're up and running again. The only real bummer is that you can't use it within 20 feet of an enemy. Otherwise, you could be pushing up with that warrior into combat, and as they're getting whacked, you could spadoinkle them and bring it all back. I will take spadoinkle over Finger of Death sometimes. If I'm fighting with my company, I'm a member of the Saracens, I've got multiple armored fighters there. I will usually split my 6 level points between Fingers of Death and Word of Mending. And if I have to choose one over the other, I'll take Word every time because I know I'll be able to use it. Same time, when I was a solo fighter, it's very difficult to get rid of those spadoinkles because the fighters, they just don't think about you. You have to train them to be used to getting Words of Mending and other mendings from you. So, yeah. This was the Wizard deep dive into spells and abilities that we have. Please tune in next time for our video about Wizard archetypes. We're going to discuss Battle Mage, Warlock, Evoker, and Generalist, and compare and contrast them. So, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe. If you have any questions or you want to tell me I did something wrong, throw it down in the comments. I promise I'd read them all. Thanks for watching.